Hey y'all, it's me Tony and I am back with a new video. I wanted to drop some light on this whole Kenya Moore and Cynthia Bailey friendship breakup. If you guys haven't heard by now, Cynthia recently shared that her and Kenya are not necessarily friends anymore at the moment. And I'm going to definitely break it down on why this has happened. And I also wanted to share with you guys a whole timeline of the whole ups and downs that we have seen between Cynthia and Kenya throughout the whole time they started filming together on Real Housewives of Atlanta. So let's get into it. So I'm going to take you guys all the way back to the BC days. Well, the Real Housewives of Atlanta BC days. Do y'all remember season 5, Kenya Moore's first season? This is when she was first meeting Cynthia Bailey, Nene Leakes, Portia, Phaedra. Okay, Cynthia and Kenya were not friends. They didn't get along. They did not mesh well. If you all remember, Cynthia invited Kenya to her Bailey agency to help her judge future potential models for the agency. And Kenya was a bit rude to the future models. They were like younger girls. And Kenya might have been coming from a strong point, as in, this is tough love. That's what she was basically saying. But it came off a bit too strong for Cynthia and her co-workers. They were like horrified that Kenya was talking so harshly to the models. She even told one model like, oh, you need to shave, and why'd you come here? I can see your coochie crack. Like, she was just pretty much very invasive when it came to the way she spoke with the ladies. In that same season, we ended up seeing Kenya and Cynthia getting into it at an event that Cynthia threw for Nene Leakes at the time. She was honoring her for all of her accomplishments, and she was giving a nice speech at the event that she threw for her best friend Nene. And Kenya grabbed the mic from Cynthia and disrespected her. She called her a clown show, and then she even went as far as saying Cynthia's just a talking head, and she was pretty rude to her. And they had a little back and forth, but eventually the ladies moved past it. And they definitely somehow made a connection, because by the time season 6 reunion hit, when Portia pulled Kenya's hair, that whole physical altercation, Cynthia was the only housewife on the show that actually had Kenya's back. She was saying that it wasn't right for Portia to become physical with Kenya, and she literally was the only one who was actually defending her. And Cynthia defending Kenya definitely put a hole in her and Portia's friendship. They definitely had a rift after that, but I guess it didn't matter to Cynthia because she had definitely picked who she wanted to be friends with. She chose Kenya. Now, let's not forget season 7. Season 7 is when we all saw a whole new side of Cynthia Bailey. In the past, Cynthia had seemed like a little flower, just very sweet and soft, but no. Season 7, we saw a whole new Cynthia, and a lot of viewers felt that she had changed because she was being coached into being a mean girl by Kenya Moore. This was the closest that we had ever seen them before. These two were hanging out, but one thing they had in common was their dislike for Nene Leakes. And that Cynthia was just a very harsh Cynthia, honestly. Do you guys remember when Kenya had told Cynthia to put it on the table, like, hey, this news from Peter, Peter heard from Apollo that Phaedra is cheating on her husband, and Cynthia just blurted it out. Well, she couldn't fully blurt it out, but Cynthia was getting backed up by Kenya on what to say. Now, that definitely showed that these two had a new alliance. And now I want you guys to remember season 8. Do you guys remember that season when Kim Fields was on and they took that cash trip to Jamaica? At the time, Cynthia was launching her sunglass company and she wanted a commercial. She asked both Kenya and Kim Fields if they would mind filming her commercial. Now, Kim only wanted to work solo, but Kim was like, you can definitely interview and pick who you want to pick. Cynthia ended up going along with Kim Fields, and that devastated Kenya, okay? That caused their first big rift in their friendship, to the point where they were filming the commercial in Jamaica, and Kenya wasn't even present for the commercial. She wasn't active. She didn't want to be involved. When it was the three of them, as in Kim Fields, Cynthia, Kenya was so nasty to Kim Fields, and Team Twirl, don't come for me, okay? Because Kenya and actually said that she regrets how nasty she was to Kim Fields. She was so nasty to Kim Fields because Cynthia picked her instead of, herself. that she literally pulled out this woman's chair when the woman was trying to get up and walk away from an argument with Kenya. Kenya was awful and Cynthia was horrified. She said in her confessional she didn't know what to do. Like, it was just humiliating the way Kenya went off on Kim Fields and tried to provoke her and pull out her chair. And then after that, she went off on Cynthia. And Cynthia was just like a deer in headlights. She couldn't say anything. On that same trip, Nene Leakes ended up coming and surprising all the girls, but Cynthia knew because they had made up, but she didn't tell anyone, and that sent Kenya more over the edge. She wasn't feeling it, okay? And to make it even worse, Cynthia had a moment where she downplayed her and Kenya's friendship because people were saying, oh, well, Kenya is Cynthia's new best friend. And Cynthia was like, well, we're still getting to know each other. We're not necessarily best friends, but we're still getting to know each other. And of course, the ladies went back and told Kenya that, and she was devastated.
My elevator doesn't go down to this floor.
Oh, let's stand up and clap. You win the award. Let me pull your chair for you. Kenya, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Let's go. Don't do that. Here you go.
Now, that was season 8. Season 9, I don't recall any major issues between Kenya and Cynthia. However, season 10, there was some stir up about their friendship because this is when Kenya came on the show and announced that she had gotten married. And no one knew she gotten married, not even Cynthia, who is supposed to be her best friend. Everyone is like, okay, well, how come no one knew about it? How come Cynthia wasn't invited to your marriage? And when asked about it at the season 10 reunion, Kenya actually said, well, the reason why I didn't tell Cynthia and Cynthia's gonna be mad is because Cynthia can't hold water. And that was completely throwing Cynthia under the bus because all the ladies were like, what? Like, we've never known Cynthia to not be able to hold a secret. And it was a bit weird because at first Kenya was saying nobody was invited. It was super private. But we know her best friend, Brandon, actually walked her down the aisle. So it definitely seemed like, okay, sometimes you ladies both downplay each other. And maybe you guys aren't as genuine as friends as you guys claim to be on the show. However, it definitely seemed real at times because Cynthia had gotten very emotional during season 10 when the ladies kept questioning how come you didn't know about Kenya getting married and why haven't you met her husband yet? So if y'all remember, season 11, Kenya was not on the show. She was pregnant and didn't renew her contract. However, season 12, we got to see a lot of cracks between her and Cynthia's friendship. If you guys remember, one of the first issues during season 12 between Cynthia and Kenya was the way Kenya would talk to Cynthia. It was at Cynthia's home. She was hosting her Bailey Q, where she does her little, everyone wear red and we play games and we eat like barbecue food. Okay, Cynthia felt like Kenya was talking to her disrespectful and she was trying to check her at her home. Remember, this was like the whole issue when Kenya was going off on Eva, who was pregnant at the time, based on he say, she say. And Cynthia was trying to intervene like, hey, it didn't really happen this way because she didn't want Kenya to be upset. And Kenya started going off on Cynthia and Cynthia was trying to check her like, hey, no, like, you don't talk to me that way, like, whatever. And everyone was like, ooh, like, why are you talking to her so nasty and why are you going off on her in her own house? And a few episodes later, it was Kenya who was throwing Cynthia under the bus with that whole cookie lady situation. If you guys remember Tanya was on the show. Her and Kenya had a small fallout, and Kenya decided to bring the cookie lady, who was allegedly someone who was trying to talk to Tanya's fiance at the time, or maybe he was trying to talk to her, but Kenya had heard from the lady about it, and Kenya decided to ambush Tanya and bring the lady to lunch so she could confront Tanya. Now, that was pretty nasty work, I'm not gonna lie, but it is housewives, that's what they do, I guess. However, it became nastier when Kenya decided to throw Cynthia under the bus. She claimed that Cynthia knew all about the lady and that she was going to try to bring her around on purpose around Tanya so that Tanya and the lady could talk without Tanya knowing. However, Cynthia denied it. Cynthia denied it completely. She was saying that I had nothing to do with that at all. But Kenya stood firm on it. She was like, oh no, no, you had something to do with it, okay? And Kenya was not trying to take the blame for it by herself. But we don't know who's telling the truth. Both of them are saying something different. However, that caused a rift in that friendship, or at least a moment where we saw, okay, you two aren't really on the same page as you guys portray to be at times. Now, I want you guys to pay attention because we're still in season 12, okay? Like I said, this is when we started seeing the most consistent issues between the two. But anywho, this is when we saw Cynthia about to get engaged to Mike Hill. Mike had been planning a surprise proposal for Cynthia, and he told Candy in confidence, hey, stick around, I'm gonna do something, meaning he's gonna pop the question. Now, Candy told Kenya so that Kenya wouldn't miss it, of course, and she didn't think that Kenya was gonna say anything. Matter of fact, I think Candy even told Kenya not to say anything. Now, for some reason, Kenya decided to go to Cynthia and tell her in front of Candy, hey, I think he's gonna propose tonight. And Candy was pissed. She's like, how could you ruin this surprise for Cynthia? Like, come on, that's not cool. And Candy even went off on Kenya and was very pissed off about it. However, Cynthia didn't know it was gonna happen. But if you guys remember, later on in that season, when they did speak about that, they actually did, Cynthia told Kenya, hey, like, Mike was pretty disturbed that you decided to tell me because he wanted that to be a surprise moment. And we want to know, like, you know, what was your intentions with that? And everyone was pretty much saying, like, that was a crappy move as your friend. You purposely tried to ruin her engagement. And Kenya, of course, you know, she was like, no, that wasn't my intentions, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it definitely did come off wrong. Now, this last issue made a lot of viewers have a bad stain on Cynthia and Kenya's friendship. Do y'all remember season 12 when the girls went to Greece and they had dinner in the sky? It was Nene, Marlo, Cynthia. It was all the girls, okay? And Kenya decided to do it in front of everyone, embarrass Cynthia for not knowing much about wine. Now, that wouldn't be a big deal if it was a regular person like me, you know, someone who's not in the wine industry. But at the time, Cynthia was trying to launch her wine cellar business, and she's supposed to be someone who knows much about wine because she's selling it. And Kenya was poking at Cynthia for not knowing much about it. And when I mean poking, she was roasting Cynthia. It was so bad that Candy had to step in and check her. All the other ladies were just like, Cynthia, wake up. Like, wake up. This girl is coming for you. This is not what friends do. And I think Kenya did feel a bit bad about it, or maybe some of the ladies told her, or maybe she saw their reactions like, hey, that wasn't cool, because she did try to buy Cynthia some bottles of wine after that happened. But Cynthia still confronted Kenya like, hey, you know, when you were doing that, that wasn't cool. It just wasn't cool. But Cynthia did forgive her. And, you know, that was that for season 12. However, I don't think that Cynthia really let it go. Because if you guys know, it wasn't too shortly after all of this that they ended up having issues on the Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip. Now, if you don't watch Ultimate Girls Trip, that's basically a show like a spinoff from Bravo. It's on Peacock, and it's just a mix of all the different housewife branches. They put like 2 girls from each show onto a trip all together and watch them blend. Now, this was the first season that they had, right? And it was Kenya and Cynthia on together with the other ladies from other franchises. And initially, we thought that those two would be, you know, tearing it up together, having a good time, because they are super close. However, this was actually the most serious breakup they ever had in their friendship. This trip, for some reason, definitely made Cynthia come off very vocal and frustrated with Kenya. And a lot of viewers felt like, okay, they didn't really understand why Cynthia seemed so frustrated with Kenya on this trip. But if you remember, Cynthia felt a way that Kenya wasn't supporting her. She felt like Kenya wasn't loyal. She felt like Kenya didn't show up on time at her event that she tried to throw. She was pretty upset with Kenya, okay? And Kenya did seem like she was trying to understand Cynthia. She did seem like she was trying to be soft, but at the same time, Kenya's like, I'm not really going to fight with you and it's not that serious for me, but I'm still going to be myself, okay? Like they're just going to be different. But in her confessional, Kenya was saying that she felt that Cynthia was jealous of her because she's able to get along with all the women compared to when they're on Housewives and Kenya is the villain and most of the girls don't like her. Now, for whatever reason, that right there made a huge rift in their friendship to the point where these two stopped talking for like a year. They were done, okay? And I have to think, Kenya, maybe Cynthia wasn't really that upset with you about the Ultimate Girls Trip. Maybe it was a whole history of everything that had happened between them. However, we don't really know because Cynthia doesn't really speak up until it's a bit too late or when she's very upset. Now, these two actually did end up making up. Cynthia's mom ended up getting breast cancer and Kenya ended up giving her flowers, and she had found out that Cynthia was going through a divorce with Mike Hill, and I believe Kenya offered her support. So they ended up making up, and Kenya pledged, okay, from this point on, with us not talking, I'm going to be there for her more often. But here we are now in 2025, and these two are no longer friends. Cynthia shared in a recent interview that they are not speaking, but she will be ready when Kenya's ready to talk. Now, why they aren't talking? Britt eating. And I'm not going to blame Britt eating directly, but according to Cynthia, again, we haven't heard Kenya's side. But Cynthia is saying that when the whole issue happened between Britt Eady and Kenya Moore, if you don't know what issue I'm talking about, I'm going to say this. Kenya showed some photos of Britt Eady at her hair spa opening, and it was being filmed for Real Housewives of Atlanta Sweet 16, okay? Now, Kenya decided to go against Britt Eady by showing explicit photos. Do I feel like it's wrong to show explicit photos? 100%. However, I do understand Kenya being frustrated with Britt because in the previous episode that just aired, we saw that Britt was implying a threat to Kenya. She was saying that basically she had weapons and that, the type of weapons that could basically delete someone, if you understand what I'm saying. She was kind of trying to intimidate Kenya with that. So I guess that's why Kenya felt like she was okay and felt like it was fair game for her to retaliate by showing explicit photos of someone. However, me personally, I don't agree with that. And someone else who doesn't agree with that is Cynthia Bailey. It caused an issue in their friendship because Cynthia told Kenya at her hair spa opening, according to her, you're better than this. This isn't cool. You don't handle things this way. It's not cool. And I guess Cynthia felt a way about it. She's like, you're supposed to be my friend. You're supposed to back me up. And I just don't feel the support. But we're going to see what happens between these two once the episode actually airs. And hopefully Kenya speaks out so we can get her side and get down to the bottom of it all. But you guys let me know what y'all think in the comments below. Tell me, who do you think is right, who is wrong? Do you guys think these two will actually make up? I really want to know because they've definitely had a lot of ups and downs. I definitely do feel like they love each other. Maybe it's just miscommunication. But you guys let me know. Again, like this video, comment, and I'm definitely going to respond with my opinion. Be sure to like, subscribe, so you guys can see the next video I drop because I will be reviewing Real Housewives of Atlanta. Thank you guys. You guys have a great day and be safe. Bye.